All right, so we're going to be starting off with the summer 2025 questions. In our today's class, we will be doing questions related to none other than chapter number 3.2, where we are going to be diving into concepts related to your input output devices. So before moving on, this is one very important point. आप लोगों को पता होना चाहिए कि आपके जो वो है ना एक सेकंड, ये ग्रुप में मैसेज कर देता हूँ कि भाइयों आ जाओ. A lot of people were there, but वो मैं लेट ही हो गया थोड़ा सा. So we have started. All right, sir. Acha, so a lot of people do not understand this one point, that usually क्या कहते हैं, आपको बोला जाता है usually that in chapter number 3 you have to memorize how input output devices work, but in reality that's not the case. So now in all these questions which we are going to be doing today, inshallah, you're going to note that the examiner is always going to tell us where are we supposed to use a specific input output device and why. The question of how to use that specific device is no longer going to be tested. So if you're preparing for chapter number 3, do make sure कि आप याद ना कर रहे हो कि how does a mouse work and what's the purpose of that laser within that mouse and how does the keyboard work when you press a specific button and it completes a circuit and it goes on. वो चीजें अब टेस्ट नहीं होंगी, and this is very important कि आपको ये अच्छे से इन चीजों का आइडिया हो चुका हो. सही है. So अभी ऐसे कि I'm starting screen sharing. This is IGCSE और O level, same, कोई difference नहीं आता उसमें. This is the summer 2025 paper number 12 and हम देखते हैं इसके अंदर do we have any sort of question related to chapter number 3.2. हम start होंगे with summer 25 and are slowly going to go back till the end of the class. So अब हम नहीं, this is not one question from there. ये भी नहीं है, ये भी नहीं. Okay, so we don't have a question यहाँ पे इस paper से. So let's look up at a different paper. Is my audio and screen clearly visible? And is my audio audible? If you guys can kindly confirm. Perfect, perfect. So let's see. यहाँ पे हमें कुछ मिलता है. Hope. Okay, ये question हमें मिल गया. सही है. So अब ये आपके जो हाँ. So again, if you haven't watched the recordings, I would 100% recommend that, because I have uploaded the whole chapter number 3 recording on my YouTube channel. You guys should go watch that if you need help with the understanding part. See? So now this part is talking about how we are going to be making use of RAM and some sort of memory. See, so a company employee is editing a video for the company's website, okay, and the data is stored in a random access memory when the video is edited. Makes sense. Which basically means कि आप जो भी data हो रहा है वो RAM के अंदर stored है. The RAM becomes full and pages of data are transmitted to a partitioned section of the secondary storage to stop the computer from crashing. Give the name of this partitioned section of secondary storage that is used in process. Now what happens is that जब आपके पास originally, when you try to for instance add or create some sort of file or maybe do some sort of graphic designing or anything which requires a lot of processing, and your RAM, which is a temporary which is like a limited space, like for instance आप लोग बोल देते हैं this is 16 GB RAM, and this is one slot where all the current files which you are trying to execute are stored. But what if I'm like executing a document which is of 18 GB and you don't have this 2 GB file 2 GB extra slot where you can store the data at, क्योंकि आपके maximum capacity 16 की है. Now what computer scientists did was कि originally ये problem जब नहीं हो सकता था तो आपका computer hang हो जाता था, slow down हो जाता था. Now what happens is that your computer makes use of virtual memory. Virtual memory is sort of like, you can say, a temporary memory which is created within your hard disk. Now this memory is created within your hard disk, whereas आपका जो 16 GB original था, that was RAM. So this means कि आपका RAM and hard disk are two different parts. But जो आपके main 16 GB जो कि execute हो रहा है वो तो आपके यहाँ चला गया, जो आप नहीं use करें या maybe something which is not required immediately, that data goes into virtual memory. And now the data transfer between your RAM and virtual memory basically includes a process of paging, which basically means कि आपका data एक second उधर जा रहा है, फिर एक second इधर आ रहा है, वगैरह वगैरह, and it continues until or unless आपकी execution properly implement हो जाए. So this question is asking कि यार जो हम partition section of वो बनाते हैं secondary storage, उसका नाम क्या है? So it is basically virtual memory. So आपको 1 mark मिलेगा for identifying it. So virtual followed by memory. You do this and you're good to go. The second part now says कि एक second, ओहो काफी tabs खुली हुई थी, बंद कर देता हूँ. Yeah. So the second part now says the secondary storage is a hard disk drive. Okay, hard disk drive. And hard disk drive is an example of magnetic storage. And one feature of magnetic storage is that it uses splitters. Gives 3 other features. अब देखो ये question में आपको ये नहीं बोला कि how does a hard disk work. वो आपको ये बोल रहा है कि यार what are the features of magnetic storage. एक आपको बता दिए, 3 और मांग रहे, which means you should be aware of at least 4 features for both the devices, for like magnetic storage, for like solid state storage, SSD वगैरह वगैरह वगैरह. So we can write any 4 या any 3. And usually होता है ये कि आपकी जो magnetic type of storage होती है उसके अंदर जो major features ये होती है कि आपकी एक drive है gold disk. It is being divided into platters, and then those platters are further divided into tracks and sectors. So it's sort of something like this, a disk जिसके अंदर आपके पास यहाँ पे platters होते हैं, see, and those platters are further divided into sectors and tracks. See, so आपके इस तरीके से ना मुख्तलिफ वो बन जाते हैं, अलग अलग slots बन जाते हैं. And then all of these slots can basically store data. So like यहाँ पे maybe data store हो गया, फिर आप जाके दूसरा data यहाँ पे आपका store हो गया, maybe some data is being stored up here and so on. इस तरह आपका data store होता है. But whenever you need to read the data or you need to like ensure कि वो we write some data onto the hard disk, तो उसके लिए आपके platters को rotate करना पड़ता है. So one feature is that your platters are divided into tracks and sectors. The other one is that your platters rotate, or we can also say it has moving parts. And the third one is it has a read-write head which uses an electromagnet to store data. तो मतलब आपकी यहाँ पे एक इस तरह डिवाइस लगी होती है which is basically a read write head. इसको हेड बोला जाता है. And it makes use of electromagnetism, and electromagnet इसके अंदर लगा होता है which allows कि यार जो हमने अब let's say मैं बोल रहा हूँ कि you need to save some file, तो ये यहाँ पे इसके ऊपर कुछ electronically magnetically कुछ कर लेते हैं जिसकी वजह से आपका डेटा यहाँ पे स्टोर हो जाता है. So this is these are some features which you can mention. अब हमने पहले देख लिया कि it uses platters, so we're going to continue and we're going to be writing it कि platters are divided into tracks and sectors. You get 1 mark for this. The second point will be where you're going to be talking about the platters, how the platters are going to be rotated so that data could be read. Platters are rotated so that the data can be read. And then the final point is going to be कि it makes use of an electromagnet, या फिर हम बोल सकते हैं it makes use of read or write head which uses an electromagnet, या फिर हम ये भी बोल सकते हैं it makes use of an electromagnet to read write data, and this will get you a perfect 3 on 3. So okay, now continuing, आपका C part बोल रहा है कि give reasons why an hard disk is an example of secondary storage. Now this indicates that you should be aware of why we categorize hard disk and SSD as secondary storage and RAM and ROM as primary. So इसका जो major difference आता है, this difference is something जो कि आप जब chapter 3 की book को open करते हैं, it's there at the very start that your primary memory is something which can be directly accessed by the CPU, whereas your secondary memory cannot be directly accessed by the CPU. And then the other point is that your secondary memory basically can store data permanently, whereas your primary memory cannot store data permanently. So अब वही बात है, आपसे 2 points मांगे, so you just need to state that firstly, जो आपकी primary memory, secondary memory, hard disk, it is not directly accessible by the CPU. It is not directly accessible by the CPU. And second point आपने ये लिख देना है, it is not directly accessible by the CPU. And secondly ये, the data is stored permanently and is not deleted until the user wishes, until the user wishes. Now इस बात का क्या मतलब है? इसका basically मतलब ये होता है कि जो आपकी primary memory है, which is like RAM, this is primary memory. Now you might have wondered कि can you zoom in? I guess it's fine, guys. Is it fine? Or should I zoom in even a bit? I guess it's fine though. But अब आपने कभी ये बात सोची होगी when you are making use of a computer and let's say बिजली चली जाए and then your computer turns off and when you re-turn on your computer, whatever game you are playing, it's gone. The computer loads all the way from the very first, very starting point. Now, why does that happen? Because whatever current execution was happening, it wasn't done within your RAM. But because the RAM is not something which stores data permanently, the moment your electrical supply to RAM gets cut off, the data in this gets vanished. बट दिस डज नॉट अप्लाई टू योर हार्ड डिस्क, जो कि यहाँ पे अगर लेट्स से मैं बोल दूं हार्ड डिस्क है, इसके अंदर जो डेटा होगा इट्स गोना बी देयर परमानेंटली अंटिल वन ऑफ यू आर लाइक ओके नाउ आई वांट टू डिलीट इट. समझ गए? Alright, so we're done with this one question and this marks the end of your one question related to hard disk. अब यही आगे हम देख लेते हैं. This is again something जो कि chapter number 3 से ही है, but this was discussed in yesterday class कि आपने अब बताना है कि okay this is 3.4, इसको छोड़ के register क्या है, clock क्या है, control unit क्या है, but let's do this, बल्कि कर ही लेते हैं. Register, if you guys remember, by the way, from the very first, this is the address given to NIC when it is manufactured. So the address given to your network interface card is basically known as MAC address. हम यहाँ पे कर लेते हैं MAC address. फिर आपके पास आते हैं the second one. वालेकुम अस्सलाम, वालेकुम अस्सलाम. The second one says what is a register. So a register, as told earlier, is basically a component in the CPU that stores data temporarily. मतलब कुछ टाइम के लिए डेटा आ जाता है, उसका काम हो गया, फिर डेटा रिमूव कर दिया जाता है उससे. So a component in the CPU that stores data temporarily. Perfect. Say, फिर clock क्या आगे? Remember I told you guys about that, what do we call it? Synchronization process yesterday, that how you can synchronize multiple operations at once using control bus. Now control bus makes use of clock. What clock does is कि यार वो जो टाइमिंग सिग्नल्स होती है ना, कि एक टाइम के अंदर कितनी दफा फेच डिकोड होना चाहिए, कितनी दफा एग्जीक्यूशन होने चाहिए, कि वो सब कुछ एक प्रॉपर मैनर के अंदर एग्जीक्यूट हो, दैट इज बीइंग मैनेज्ड बाय योर क्लॉक. So your clock basically controls the number of fetch, decode, execute cycles that are performed per second. See, अब ये ऐसे definitions है कि आप याद कर लो and you'll be good to go. So अगर आपको याद ना हो तो फिर you're going to lose marks here. So it controls the number of fetch, decode, execute cycles performed per second. Continuing, आपके पास आगे control unit के, if you guys remember, हमने कल बल्कि नहीं पढ़ा था. Control unit is one other part of CPU that basically makes use of control bus, control signals, and clock to ensure that the whole data flow is managed in the right way. So it is that part that, or in other words, I can say control unit is your brain of your computer, which basically manages the flow of data around the CPU. So it is a component that manages the flow of data across the computer, या फिर हम बोल सकते हैं across the CPU. Same. And the final one is, this is the processing unit within the CPU that can fetch, decode, and execute instructions. So it's basically that one processing unit. अब ये बड़े generalized word है, and this is something जो कि usually नहीं बच्चों को पता होगा. But this, when we call it as a processing unit, we are basically referring to core. So core जो हम बोलते हैं core i7 या core i5 वाले, so all these cores are basically processing units within the CPU which can fetch, then decode, and finally execute instruction. Guys, I would appreciate if you guys can focus on the class. Anam, please. Continuing with that, the second part now says that identify 3 registers that are used in the fetch stage of fetch, decode, execute cycle. Now fetch stage, अब इसका ये मतलब है कि आपने वो वाले बताने जो हम fetch के दौरान करें. अब fetching में क्या आता है? फेचिंग में आपके पास आ रहे होते हैं, yesterday हमने क्या पढ़ा था कि यार आपके अगला एड्रेस कहाँ पे स्टोर होता है, प्रोग्राम काउंटर के अंदर, फिर हम एड्रेस किस में डालते हैं, मेमोरी एड्रेस रजिस्टर के अंदर, उस एड्रेस के ऊपर जो डेटा है वेयर डज दैट गो, इट गोज इनटू मेमोरी डेटा रजिस्टर. सो वी कैन जस्ट राइट दीस थ्री, से सो program counter followed by memory address register and memory data register, memory data register. Easy peasy, easy marks. समझ गए? Now, continuing with that, आपका C part is now saying that circle the two buses that are used in the fetch stage of the FD cycle. Fetch stage के अंदर हमारे definitely दो ही चीजें होती है कि यार आपने डेटा लाना है and at the same time आपने maybe for instance वो करना है, क्या बोलते हैं, data, and at the same time आपने signal send करने to ensure that everything is done in the right way. But then you might also be wondering, sir, addresses के साथ भी तो हम कर रहे होते हैं, which is again you are correct. But now look up at the options. Do you have address up here? No, you don't. So we only have three buses, which are basically all three of them are used in the fetch cycle. But considering that we only have two possible options up here, तो हम वो करेंगे. So we have control bus and then we have the data bus. अब डेमरी बस हार्डवेयर सॉफ्टवेयर इंफॉर्मेशन बाइनरी, इनकी तो बसेस एग्जिस्ट ही नहीं करती. सो यू गेट 2 marks for this, 2 and 3 for this. Done. This is basically your chapter number 4, so we will not be looking into it. This marks the end of this question. Do you guys is this clear? All right, good. So now let's continue with the next paper. We now be looking into summer 25 paper number 11. I hope we find some good
Excuse me, sir.
questions
Excuse
here.
me, sir.
Otherwise we need to go to the March series.
Sir, आवाज दर्जी. Sir, can you hear me?
Uh-huh. Okay, this is a good question. Let's solve this too. Because von Neumann architecture, now if you guys are focusing on the class, you're going to be noting that a lot of these questions are again and again coming from the von Neumann architecture wala part. So originally, beforehand, like pehle ye hota tha, that a lot of questions used to come upon how input-output devices are used. But now, because the working part has been removed from your syllabus, you are no longer asked to explain how does a mouse work and stuff like that. Say, but now this doesn't mean that the examiner might not be testing it. Examiner can test it, but you should be well aware कि यार आपके ज़्यादा focus has now shifted towards how a CPU executes stuff and what are primary memory, secondary memory, and all those theoretical parts. सही है, बस आपको इन चीजों का अच्छे से पता होना चाहिए. अल्लाह हाफिज, अल्लाह हाफिज, अल्लाह हाफिज. So now your question number 5 is basically again talking about the same concept. So आपको सबसे पहले बोल रहा है कि यार what is CIR? So if you guys remember, हमने CIR में पढ़ा था कि जो भी currently execute चीज हो रही है, जो भी currently decode हो रहा है, उसको आपने CIR में डाल देना है. So we can say it stores the instruction that is currently being decoded or executed. सही है, ये अब आपको याद होंगी तभी होगा आपसे, वरना नहीं होना. The second one is like this is the processing unit within the CPU that can fetch, decode, and execute instruction. The same thing which we just studied like a minute ago. So it's your core. Then this is a list of all the commands that can be processed by the CPU. So all the commands basically come under this one set, which we usually refer to as instruction set. So instruction set is basically a set, a list, which includes all the possible functions and commands जो कि आपका computer कर सकता है. Yes, Zulkarnain, do you have a question?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I have a question. Hello.
Yeah. Sorry. My mic volume off था. Yeah.
सर क्लास की रिकॉर्डिंग हमारे पास शेयर होगी?
जी आपके पास शेयर होगी. It will be shared.
ओके सर, थैंक यू.
No problem. All right, so किधर गया? Yeah, apologies for that. मुझे पता ही नहीं था, आवाज ही बंद थी. Never mind. We're going to be continuing from where we left. So the third, what do we call it? The fourth part says, what is cache memory? So cache memory is basically one feature of your computer which basically stores the most frequently used data and instruction, ताकि आपको बार बार, अगर मैं एक बोलूं कि आपने एक स्पेसिफिक फाइल को बार बार यूज करना है, तो उसके अंदर हम, अगर मैं ये बोलूं कि आप लोग ने एक स्पेसिफिक फाइल को बार बार यूज करना है एंड वो यूज करने वक्त आपने इंश्योर करना है कि, या बल्कि इससे नहीं, टेक इट एज इफ कि मैं बोलूं देयर इज दिस वन फाइल which I need to call again and again when playing games. अब उसको मैं जाके मेमोरी से उठाऊं, उसके ऊपर काफी टाइम लगेगा, मे बी 2 milliseconds. But now I have this one other memory which I call as cache memory. Cache memory has this one feature: it is very, very, very fast in comparison to what the normal memory is. So हम क्या कर लेते हैं कि cache memory के अंदर उसको डाल देते हैं, and now next time when you want to access it, it can be accessed way more faster. And उस तरीके से काफी अच्छे से आपके performance improve हो जाएगी. So we basically can say कि cache is that part which stores frequently used data, frequently use data or instruction. Finally, the last one is like accumulator. Now, accumulator is that part which stores the result of any ongoing calculation. So, जो हमने कल ALU पढ़ा था, ALU was like dealing with mathematical calculation. So, I'm like, okay, 2 plus 5 कर दो, 7. Now you need to execute this 7 in your CIR, whatever. But now CIR is currently busy doing some other things. So where are you going to be storing these mathematical answers at? So the specific register जो कि आपके mathematical answers को store कर रहा होगा, that is known as accumulator, or usually it's also referred to as ACC. So accumulator, it basically stores the result of interim calculations. And आपको easy 5 marks इसके मिल जाते हैं. Then the second B part says identify the component in the CPU. Identify the component in the CPU which that is responsible for decoding an instruction. Yes, Zulkarnain, do you have a question? You can send it in the chat box though. Control unit, yeah. जी control unit का क्या? على كانوا داس تلكم تاسو دالي داري خبرك أو كان دا ما خوخ نده. سيدا. Focus on the class, otherwise I will just turn off the chat box. Yeah. Yes, Zulkarnain, do you have a question? You can. Sir, control unit is the component. Yeah, component of what? अच्छा, control unit is basically that part. अच्छा नहीं मैं बता देता हूँ. Control unit is basically that part of your computer which allows you to basically ensure synchronization. So मतलब मैं ये बोलूँ कि एक टाइम के ऊपर एक कमांड है, ये एक component है, component 1, and this is component 2, and ये component से आपस के अंदर data transfer करना है इधर से उधर, so data is going here and there. What is that security guard up here जो कि ये इंश्योर करेगा कि डेटा प्रॉपरली इधर उधर जा रहा हो, सही टाइम के अंदर सब कुछ हो रहा हो, कोई आपके डिलेज ना आ रहे हो, कोई आपके मसाइल ना आ रहे हो. So that part of your computer CPU, which basically ensures that your whole computer flow is maintained, that is basically done by your control unit. So it basically helps you with the implementation of the whole execution, or maybe the execution of a specific instruction in the right way. Yes, I am a Pathan though, so I do know Pashto. Acha, देखो, I will not be. Acha, these are just topical questions sessions. These are not like official course contents. We will be having our first official class from the 1st of December, which will be only for the registered students. So if you guys want to join that, I will share the link in the group, and you guys can fill out that form. And uske andar aapko, we're going to be studying the whole course all the way from the very first topic till the end, and we'll be doing ample amount of practice ek saath, and inshallah hum ensure karenge that you are fully prepared for that distinction or A star in your upcoming examinations, inshallah. But for now, जो आपके ये classes है, these are just going to go till the 1st of December, and इसके अंदर inshallah we're just going to be doing multiple sort of past paper questions. So we started from the first topic, and currently we are at topic number 3. Faizan, you will be reached out when the classes begin. So like from 1st of December, we are going to be offering 1 week free demo classes. And by the end of that period, you'll be reached out by our TA at Conceptuals Academy, inshallah. And वो आपको फिर बता देंगे, and you will be soon added to the registered students group. सही है? So आपके वो note हो चुका है. They will be online, all online. So perfect. Is this clear? किसने क्वेश्चन पूछा था? जुल्करनैन, is this clear ना कि what control unit is and उसका क्या काम है? Perfect. Now, part B says that identify the component in the CPU that is responsible for decoding an instruction. Okay, by the way, Zulkarnain, if you were referring to this, अब मुझे समझ आई शायद आप इसकी बात कर रहे हो, but the answer to part B is also control unit. Same? Yep. This is control unit. And now your part C is basically saying, yeah, got it. So part C says that explain how the clock speed can affect the performance of a CPU. So ऊपर मैंने आप लोग को बोला था कि यहाँ पे नहीं previous किसी में बात की थी कि your clock speed is basically बल्कि नहीं की थी. Clock speed is basically how fast a specific instruction is being decoded. Say so when you increase the speed of your clock speed, it basically allows you to execute multiple or maybe more instructions at once. So इस वजह से the answer to this basically part is that on each clock pulse an FDE cycle is performed, which means कि यार जब एक दफा आपकी घड़ी का टक होता है ना, मतलब 1 2 3, ये जितना एक मूवमेंट आपकी क्लॉक पल्स आ रही है ना, इसके ऊपर आपके एक पूरा साइकिल परफॉर्म हो रहा है. So when I say that you have 1 second being executed or whatever your clock speed was, one क्वांटिटी या 1 यूनिट ऑफ व्हाटएवर योर क्लॉक स्पीड वाज, इसके दौरान आपके एक फेच डिकोड एग्जीक्यूट साइकिल परफॉर्म हो जाता है. सो वी कैन राइट इट एज फर्स्टली ऑन ईच पल्स ऑन ईच पल्स ऑन ईच क्लॉक पल्स कर देते हैं, ऑन ईच क्लॉक पल्स एंड फेच FDE is executed. Cycle भी कर दे. So on each clock, yes, Zulkanan. Yeah, no worries, no last question. जितने पूछने चाहते हो पूछते रहो. These are the purpose of these classes. So आप लोग ने जितना पूछना है पूछते रहो. Yes. So I can turn on the mic for you. Just a minute. You can ask it वहाँ पे. Yeah. एक second. How do you turn it on? Yep. Yes, Zulkanan.
एक्सक्यूज मी सर.
जी.
सर आपका जो ये कोर्स है ना, ये IGCSE NGCE दोनों के लिए
Guys, let one person speak at once. Yes, Zulkarnain, किस तरह?
सर आप जो अभी कोर्स कराएंगे हमें, ठीक है, तो वो हम GC और IGCSE दोनों के लिए कवर कर सकते हैं?
यस. अच्छा, ये मैंने काफी कॉम्प्रिहेंसिवली पहले भी बता दी है कि आपके IGCSE GC O लेवल इनका सेम टू सेम कोर्स है. सो लाइक आपके ये होता है कुछ पेपर्स के अंदर देयर इज डिफरेंस, बट फॉर सब्जेक्ट्स लाइक इकोनॉमिक्स एंड कंप्यूटर साइंस आपका कोर्स कंटेंट तो सेम होता ही है. आपका जो एक्चुअल एग्जाम पेपर है दैट इज आल्सो सेम. सही. सो मतलब आप अगर जाके नाउ दिस इज करंटली एन IGCSE पेपर 0478, लेकिन आप 221011 मई जून 25 खोलो, इट्स द एग्जैक्ट सेम पेपर. So your syllabus content is same, your past papers are same, everything is 100% same. So you don't need to worry. आप fully अच्छे तरीके से अपने, if you're going for GC, you'll be prepared for that. If you're going for IGCSE, you're going to be prepared for that, inshallah. Yes, Junaid.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Junaid, do you have a question? Yeah, in these free classes, अगर हमारे पास time हुआ तो we will go through what do we call it, questions related to paper 2. Otherwise, if you join our official course, so yes, definitely we're going to be going through the whole of paper 2 and we'll be doing it in ample great amount. If you guys want, I can share this one quick overview. This is like my October-November session. तो इसके अंदर आप लोग देख लो. This is how we went. So like chapter number 10 के क्या क्या content थे, उनके past paper question, chapter number 9 के क्या क्या थे revision classes content, chapter number 8 के अंदर हमने ये सारा कुछ अच्छे से cover up किया था, and उसके अंदर like सब कुछ करके past paper question 15 markers, chapter number 7 के अंदर, and just like that आपका सारा course content. So we're going to be going through all the way from the very first introduction and syllabus video all the way to topicals, past papers, and multiple other practice sessions. Same. This is currently the one which I was showing. This is basically the portal access to my October-November students. So the one which the October-November students had. So if you guys plan on joining my course, आपको इसी तरह का portal access provide कर दिया जाएगा, and उसके ऊपर आप लोग के इसी तरह classes upload किए जाएंगे. We're going to be covering the whole course together, inshallah. It's going to be a very fun experience. Now back to the question. So we were talking about how on each clock pulse an FDE cycle is executed, and the clock speed is basically the number of FD cycles performed in a second. Say हम ये बोल सकते हैं the second point that the clock speed is the clock speed is the number of FDE cycles performed per second. अच्छा, another important point is कि अब यहाँ पे मैं FDE लिख रहा हूँ. Now in your exam आप लोगों ने FD नहीं लिखना. You guys have to write the whole word fetch decode execute. सही है. A lot of times या फिर आप ये कर सकते हैं कि आप एक टाइम के ऊपर आप इस तरह लिख दो FDE एंड ब्रैकेट के अंदर fetch decode execute explain कर दो एंड उसके बाद आप वो कर लेते ना तो आपको अच्छा हुआ जाएगा. What is CPU? CPU is basically control processing unit. It is that part of your computer which allows you to basically decode and execute stuff. सही है. So आप CPU के बारे में जनरल चैप्टर 3 के वीडियोस ही देख लो. You're gonna understand well because these classes are only meant for practice. Say, so we won't be diving here and there onto the basic content. So दो points हमारे ये हो गए. One is this. One is this. And now the third point is basically about how when your clock speed is increased, it can improve this performance because more cycles can be performed at once. So हम इसको blue के साथ लिख देते हैं. When the clock speed is increased, clock speed is increased, more fetch execute cycle fetch decode execute FDE cycles are executed at once. FDE cycles are executed at once, which allows better performance and you get perfect 3 on 3 for this. But yeah, वही बात है कि आपको ये points याद होंगे तो you guys are gonna understand it the right way. Now is this clear part C? Because this is one point जो कि usually काफी confusing होता है. But is this clear? And should we go on to the next paper? If you guys have any questions, you guys can just raise your hand or just send a message in the text box and I will get to it. Perfect. Yes, Zulkanan. एक second. I can. Yep.
सर मंथली चार्जेस क्या है क्लासेस की?
आपके जो क्लासेस के रिलेटेड जितने क्यूरीज है यू गाइस कैन रीच आउट टू मी लेटर ऑन. बाय द वे जो फॉर्म फिल किया हुआ है उसके ऊपर आपको सारी डिटेल्स मिल जाएंगी तो एनीथिंग रिगार्डिंग द कोर्स कैन बी फाउंड देयर. अभी जिसने जो क्वेश्चन रिलेटेड टू सर इट लुक्स लाइक 3 रिपीटेड पॉइंट्स. नो इट इज नॉट. व्हाई? लेट मी एक्सप्लेन. द फर्स्ट पॉइंट सेज दैट आपके एक साइकिल के ऊपर सो लाइक वन क्लॉक पल्स इंडिकेट्स one fetch decode execute cycle to be executed. So मतलब एक दफा आपकी घड़ी के ऊपर टक होगा तो this basically means that आपका एक proper cycle execute होगा. So like one instruction is being decoded and then that is being executed. The second one says that the clock speed जो कि हमने speed ऊपर बात की है, this is basically the number of fetch decode cycle performed per second. तो ऊपर वाले में हम ये बोल रहे हैं कि ईच पल्स के ऊपर आपकी एक दफा साइकिल एग्जीक्यूट हो रही है एंड जो हमने क्लॉक स्पीड बोली है बेसिकली इज द नंबर ऑफ फेच डिकोड एग्जीक्यूट साइकिल्स परफॉर्म पर सेकंड. एंड देन द थर्ड पॉइंट बेसिकली सेज कि यार जो द नंबर जो आपके टोटल क्या कहते हैं क्लॉक स्पीड के ऊपर चल गया. सो जो थर्ड पॉइंट है वो आपको ये बोल रहे हैं कि यार जब आप अपने क्लॉक स्पीड को इंक्रीज करते हैं दिस बेसिकली मींस कि कम टाइम के अंदर वे मोर नंबर ऑफ फेच डिकोड एग्जीक्यूट साइकिल्स कैन बी एग्जीक्यूटेड एंड दिस इज इवेंचुअली गोइंग टू रिजल्ट इन अ मच बेटर परफॉर्मेंस. आप समझ आई? Rayan, it's not like, yeah, it does give the impression that it's sort of like repeating the same point, but it's not. It's sort of discussing 3 different aspects, and then you need to basically create a link between all those 3 points to get a perfect 3 on 3. Never mind. Let's continue on to the next question. So we can go to like March 25. Let's do March 25. Say, I hope we find a good question वहाँ पे. Otherwise, फिर हमने कहीं और से देखना होगा. Okay, नहीं मिला. Let me search for 0478 March 25 question paper 12. Okay, so I hope we do have a question related to chapter number 3 here. Nahi. Okay, this is chapter number 3, but you're going to see that all chapter number 3 questions at this point. Okay, finally we did get a good question. So हम अब उस question को नहीं करेंगे जिसके अंदर हमने काफी von Neumann model को अच्छे से discuss करिए. We now be looking forward towards input output. So question number 4. Okay, question number 4 says कि there is an automated teller machine, which is basically your ATM devices, and it's that device where a person inserts their bank card and can request to withdraw money, and the ATM allows a person to check how much money they have in their account. So part 1 says A, that a sensor is used to detect when a person stands within 1 meter of the ATM. Guys, एक काम करते हैं, फोकस कर लो द नेक्स्ट 10-15 minutes, एंड देन वी कैन हैव अ गॉसिप सेशन, सही है, उसमें हम अच्छे से सारी डिटेल में बातें कर लेते हैं, बट बिकॉज दिस रिकॉर्डिंग हैज टू गो ऑन टू यूट्यूब, सो आई डू नॉट वांट टू इंक्लूड यूजर स्टफ, राइट? So sir, is it necessary to know MAC and IP address, Sara? Yes, it is necessary to know what MAC address is, what IP address is, and how and where MAC address might be used and where IP address might be used, सही है? So आपको ये अच्छे से पता होना चाहिए कहाँ पे किसके क्या फीचर्स हैं. So the features behind, also the characteristic के like आपको बोल सकते हैं give us 3 features of IP address. तो आपको पता होना चाहिए कि वो क्या करते हैं, आप क्या आइडेंटिफाई करते हैं, क्या उसका फॉर्मेट हो सकता है, IPv4 IPv6 में डिफरेंसेस क्या है, what's the difference between MAC address and IP address, so all those stuff, say. So now the first part say a sensor is used to detect when a person stands within 1 meter of the ATM, and when a person is detected, a welcome message is displayed on the screen. Identify an appropriate sensor for the ATM to use to detect a person. So जब आपके इस तरह के sensors होते हैं जिसके अंदर let's say यहाँ पे आप आ गए and it's going to be detecting you, okay, I have detected one person. This can be done through like infrared sensor or also through proximity sensor. तो आप जो लिखना चाहते हैं, you're good to go. I personally will love to go with infrared sensor. तो मैं infrared लिखूंगा. Now the second part says describe the role of the microprocessor in detecting the person. So होता कुछ इस तरह है कि आपके data receive होता है from the sensor, and then the sensor data is basically used to calculate distance to the person, and then we compare the data with the program जिसको हमने बताया हुआ कि यार software, अगर आपके सॉफ्टवेयर के अंदर हम उसको एक बात बता देते हैं एंड उसके अंदर oh, bhai, I'm not a teacher at any school. I'm a freshman at LUMS, currently studying computer science. So the second part basically says कि हाँ, अब होता ही है कि let's say हमने एक sensor implement कर दिया. Now this sensor is basically going to be sending us data. Now this data is going to go into a computer. Now your computer has a software. उस सॉफ्टवेयर को हमने पहले से बताया हुआ है that when you detect that the distance is less than 1 meter, तो आपने क्या करना है, you need to send a welcome message. So this is how your whole software works. So you have a sensor. The sensor is going to be sending consecutively data, and then that data will be sent to the computer, and the computer is going to calculate the distance. So हम यहाँ पे बोल सकते हैं calculate distance, and then this distance is compared with that memory जो हमने उसको पहले से बताया कि यार the distance should be less than 1 meter. If it is less than 1 meter, you should send a welcome message. So now we need to be basically writing this. Yes, Zarak, do you have a question? If you have any question, you guys can just send in the chat box. All right, say.
Sir.
G. No worries. Acha. So, that won't be possible. Atil, that won't be possible. Never mind. So we're going to be continuing from where we left. So अभी हमने इसी सारी logic को we need to basically write it in terms of proper English. So अब हम इसको कैसे लिखेंगे? हम इसको लिखेंगे इस तरह के, सबसे पहले हमने ये बताना है कि भाई the data will be received consecutively from the sensor. So we're going to be writing that we will receive data continuously from the sensor. The word continuously here is very important क्योंकि आपके data कभी भी sensor से रुकता नहीं है. So it keeps on sending data. Okay, all right, that's perfect. So it keeps on sending data again and again till the point where maybe something unique is detected. And unless that something unique part isn't detected, it's not going to stop sending data. So you should know this one point about sensor, that sender usually it's assumed that when something unique is detected, it is that point when the sensor is basically giving us a signal, but it's not like that. What happens is that your sensors are again consecutively sending you data, and it's your computer which, when identifies that something unique is happening, then it ensures that now do something like this. So like in our case, we are going to be receiving data continuously from the sensor, and we are then going to be using the sensor data to calculate distance to the person. So we will then use the data to calculate the distance calculate the distance to the person. And finally, once we have calculated the distance and we know that the person is, let's say, 1 meters or like maybe 0.8 meters. So now how are we going to make this decision whether we need to output that welcome message or not? So for that, what we need to do is we need to basically have this condition within our software that if the distance is less than 1 meter, you should go on and display a welcome message, because it's stated in the question that if it is less than 1 meter, you need to basically send a welcome message. So now what we are going to be writing here is that now at this point, we are going to be explaining that we will be comparing the sensor data to the stored data, compare the calculated distance to the stored distance. Now, what's the stored distance? The one which we, while initially programming it, told the program that you need to do something when the distance reduces from what? 1 meter. So this 1 meter is my stored address, stored distance. So anything when it goes less than 1 meter is a clear indicator that, okay, something has to happen right now. So it'll be like, okay, you need to compare the calculated distance to the stored distance of 1 meter, and if it is less, then the computer will display, yeah, or we can say then the ATM will display a welcome message. Now, in this specific answer, I wrote 4 points. So you get one for this, then you get one for this, you get one for the comparing the calculated distance one, and finally, if it is less than this, so you get like 1 mark for this too. So if you even miss one of them, you're still going to get good marks. So you don't need to worry about that. Guys, Junaid and Atel, I would have to then remove you guys if you guys are not stopping. See? This is the last question though. Iske baad we are going to end either way. So now part B says that describe the features of the ATM that identify it as an embedded system. So now when studying embedded system, aapko pata hona chahiye ki embedded system has a specific set of functions. So like it has a dedicated function, it has some sort of dedicated hardware, which cannot be easily reprogrammed, or maybe it is something which contains some sort of a microprocessor, and maybe like if it includes a microprocessor, this means it does not have a CPU, because CPU and microprocessor are two different things. But now because we need to write only 2 points, because 2 marks, so we need to like write 2 points. So 2 marks equals to 2 points. See? So 1 point can be that it has a dedicated function. Firstly, it has a dedicated function, which is the key recognition element of an embedded system. So firstly, it has a dedicated system or function. It has a dedicated function. You get 1 mark for this. And now secondly, you can talk about how it cannot be easily reprogrammed, or it has a dedicated hardware, or it contains a microprocessor. So I can go like, secondly, it has a dedicated hardware. By dedicated hardware, I mean that if you go, your hardware devices used for an ATM are pretty similar, because it has like one jack which can allow you to enter the card, then it has a receipt printer, then it has a specific slot which can be used to not print out this specific part where you get the money from. And so you see that there is a specific set of hardware being used again and again. So we can always say that if there is a device which is making use of a specific hardware and at the same time is of a specific function, because you see now the specific ATM machine, now when you go to an ATM machine, it is also a computer, but can you go and watch YouTube on that? No, right? Why? Because it has a specific dedicated function. Now when you have dedicated function and a dedicated hardware to something, that is something we call as embedded system. Yeah, sure. Are we given a key? So Inaya, I'll get to that question after the class. See? So the part C now says that the ATM has a touch screen and a keypad. The ATM may need to be used by people who are unable to see. Okay. Identify one other input device and one other output device that can be built into the ATM to help people who are unable to see. Now you see the questions now examiner are testing us. They are trying to test us with questions related to how to use them. Where to use them. How to wala part to idea. So where to use them. So it's not asking us how does a touch screen work, how does a keypad work. It's rather asking me where can I make use of a specific input output device. So in a scenario where maybe one person is blind and he or she is unable to see what's on the ATM, we can make use of a microphone as an input device. which through which she can like basically, or he can basically tell their pin code and then how much money they want to deposit or maybe take out from the ATM, right? And then at the same time, if there is a person who might not be able to see properly, we can introduce a speaker as an output device, which can clearly say that how much money do you need. So like 5,000, 10,000, and so on. So at the point which you said input card reader, that's wrong, because in the question they said that it might be used by someone who is unable to see. So if a person is unable to see, it's really difficult for them to figure out what's on the input card reader. समझे? So for that reason, that point is wrong. That marks the end of this question too, and it's 10:04. So we will be, oh, bulky ye question. This is, by the way, chapter number 3.4. So we will be dealing with this inshallah in tomorrow's class, alongside some other questions related to the same concepts of what do we call it? This input output devices. So we're going to be starting off from this question inshallah. If I don't, do send me a reminder कि यार आप लोगों ने March 25 के paper number 12 से करना है. Oh, do you guys have any questions? Just a minute, Zilkanan. एक second. Yes, Zilkanan.
No, sir.
Yes, Zilkanan.
Sorry, is this your first time of teaching computer science?
Hmm. Who? Me?
Yes, sir.
I know. I've been teaching. This might be like my second official batch, but I've been teaching now for the last 2 years.
Sir, can you explain a concept most students misunderstand in this topic and how you help them to overcome it?
Yeah, of course. So just a minute. Let me end the recording, and then we can have a quick session on that.
Okay.